A few years ago, I was a university student in Eastern Washington, but dating a girl in Western Washington. I was visiting her for the weekend during the summer when we got into a huge fight around midnight, and I left, deciding to head back to my apartment. I mention this for context as to why I was driving through Snoqualmie Pass after 1 in the morning. I'd never gone through the pass so late before, and what's usually a very busy stretch of freeway on I-90 was completely empty. I went well over an hour without seeing a single vehicle going either way, so naturally, I was driving way too fast. At the time, I had a '73 Chevy Nova. It wasn't quite the classic, but it had power and a complete lack of AC. Even though it was late at night, the combination of a warm summer night and the large amount of heat that blew through from the engine meant that I had my windows down and was sweating. Not far into the east side of the mountains, around 1:30, I hit a long stretch of straight road that doesn't have an on-ramp or any way to get onto the freeway, when suddenly a set of headlights appeared behind me, something like 200 feet back. I glanced back at the lights, puzzled as to where the vehicle could have possibly come from. I noticed that despite the fact that I was absolutely hauling, the lights were gaining on me. I decided to switch lanes and slow down a bit so it could pass. After a moment, the vehicle, now only half that distance, moved over behind me into the same lane. This is when I began to panic. I'm in the middle of nowhere, hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour, and now I've got some aggressive driver running up on me. I watched as those lights got closer. 60 feet, 50 feet, 40 feet. In seconds, it was upon me. I braced against the steering wheel, expecting to get rear-ended by a vehicle going much faster than me now. I watched in my rear-view mirror in horror as those headlights blasted right into the back of my vehicle, and suddenly, everything froze. Quite literally. Nothing physically hit me, but the whole vehicle frosted over, and I could see my breath. I hit the brakes and did my best to pull over, despite not being able to see through the windshield. Every hair on my body was standing on end. I got out of my vehicle and paced back and forth, examining my car, which was already starting to defrost, as streams of water poured down it. There was no damage to my back bumper, and absolutely no sign of whatever vehicle had hit me. Eventually, I calmed down enough to get back in the car and drive the rest of the way back, wake my roommates, and explain what had just happened. The next time I drove through the area in the daylight, right about where I think the ghost car had hit me, there was a very old wooden cross, somewhat overgrown, on the side of the road. So just touching on this for clarity of the situation, Spouse was really heavy into RPing, and one of the guys was just obnoxious. Spouse didn't use headphones, and often I ended up feeling unwelcome and uncomfortable in my own bedroom. I'm not sure anymore what the guy said. I do recall that he'd been loud and obnoxious for quite a bit, and I'd repeatedly expressed having issues just this session alone. Eventually I got fed up with it and went on to lay on the fold-down couch in the living room. So I have to have my head covered to be comfortable, since I was a kid. Face out, sure, but head covered by the blanket. Nightlight on, so if I had to get up to go to the bathroom, it would be easy. I was trying to just go to sleep, but I was also too angry and hurt to really be making much progress there. I got this weird feeling, but kept figuring it was just me being upset and messing with me. Like, not exactly bad or scary exactly, but that something was up. All things considered, it was pretty easy to brush off as me being upset. But then I got tired of laying there trying to go to sleep, so I opened my eyes. In the reflection of the TV was something very silver grey. Tattered garment of some sort. Robe? Dress? Shroud? Honestly not sure. They had bony wings and were leaning down by my head, appearing to either be giving or be close to giving the side of the top of my head a kiss. I started feeling like I shouldn't be looking at them, and then they turned. I covered my face and made sure not to breathe heavily. I tried to pretend like I didn't see them. I never, even then, felt in danger. I felt Closest thing I can say is guilty, but that's not quite right. Definitely like they didn't mean any harm, but I wasn't supposed to look at them. What kind of a being could that have been? What were they doing? Why would they choose me? Years later, I still haven't been able to find out what they may be, and it randomly comes back to me. It feels important, but I don't know. I grew up in a really weird penthouse before I was 12. I never liked it. The cathedral ceilings echoed every damn whisper. The upstairs had no windows, and my mum and dad never furnished the space. Everything was an icy white or pale grey. The penthouse was a horrible place, and I never got used to it. I should mention that now that I'm grown, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in the supernatural, and I don't think there's anything that physics and non-Newtonian physics can't explain. But I know what I know. The house was a mess. At night, people would knock on the door over and over, but there would never be anyone there. It took a few months, but I learned to stop checking for visitors after dark. One night, I thought I saw the windows warp in front of my eyes. My mother said it was because I was falling asleep. That had never happened before, and has never happened since. There was a children's playground a block away in a small parkette. I could hear kids playing there all the time as sunset approached and towards bedtime. I should have known that wasn't right. I knew it wasn't right when my grandmother came to stay one night and was kept up to the wee hours of the morning by the sound of those shrieking children. My neighbours, I thought the woman next door was a tyrant. Every night she screamed at her son. Every night he wept. Then they moved away. But the screaming never stopped, and the boy never sounded as if he had grown older throughout the years. My father once asked my mother if she was sleeping fine. He kept hearing her turn the faucet in the bathroom on and off throughout the night. He never asked her again after she told him she'd been sleeping through the night. Another time, the radio in my father's empty study flipped on. I comforted my mother and told her the wiring was acting up. This had never happened before and never happened again. I hated that house. I haven't lived there for decades, but I still have recurring nightmares of it. But, and I mean this, I don't believe in ghosts. So before my dad came to North America, he was practicing to become a priest. In some cultures, it's widely believed that a priest should also learn about and perform exorcisms. It's a very old world thing, but still a very prevalent thing. My grandfather used to perform them, and so did my great-grandfather. My dad has told me some of his stories. They're pretty fascinating. I grew up in a heavy Catholic household, but I'm not very religious. I'd like to believe in ghosts, but I've never seen one. So naturally, when my dad told us stories, I was sort of a skeptic. The one thing my dad likes to hammer in is that I take after him. He believes I have a gift like him. He used to tell me he was so successful with exorcisms because he was like a sixth sense and can feel, hear, touch the supernatural. He can sort of understand them. I, on the other hand, can't do that. My weird gift is being able to dream about things vividly and have them happen soon right after. It feels like deja vu, but I know what is about to happen. I know it's more common than people think, so I don't really pay much mind to it. One day, when I was about 14, my dad received a phone call. It was an acquaintance who knew of my dad in his work back home. Mind you, my dad had now become a therapist, the opposite of a priest, and hadn't done an exorcism in probably a decade that I know of. Side note, my dad has always been liberal with parenting. My mum was a nurse and always working, so we spent a lot of time with him, and between me and my two other sisters, it was a free-for-all. If my mum was there, she would have told my dad no way. So my dad takes the phone call, agrees to the job, and then looks at me. He announced I'll be joining because I have this gift and wants me to understand what he does. Ugh. We pull up to this big house in a more affluent neighbourhood in our city, and I already feel sick. I can't explain the feeling. It's like the moment we drove into the driveway, I was nauseous and panicked. For no reason, it was a normal house, nothing out of the ordinary. I told my dad how I was feeling, and he quietly told me that we were going to go inside. There was a couple in their mid-40s that lived in that house. They had no children, just the both of them. The husband opened the door, and the first thing I noticed was the bags under his eyes. Second thing I noticed was that the house had no lights on inside. After we entered, I felt like the air in the house was being sucked out of my lungs. I don't know. Like if you put your mouth to a low-setting vacuum. Weird, I know. I've never felt that way before. My dad set up a little shrine in their living room and prayed to it. Then he and the husband went upstairs to see his wife. For some fucking reason, they left me alone downstairs in the den. So it's dark because the lights aren't on, and I'm sitting on their couch. I suddenly feel like fingers poking at my back, like viciously. Like people with long fingernails just jabbing my back to get my attention. Now, I'm on a couch that's against the wall, so my deduction is how can this even be happening? Naturally, I'm too afraid to look, so I just get up and walk straight out of the room without looking back. I walk into the kitchen and I can feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I feel as though there are people behind me, talking softly so as not to disturb me. It sounds like two men and a woman are speaking, but my dad and the couple are upstairs, and it doesn't sound like them anyways. I'm too scared to move and I just stare at the fridge for what seems like an eternity. My dad comes back downstairs after a while and I tell him what happened. He was sympathetic and told me to pray as he brought me back upstairs with him. I was too scared to be left alone. He brings me into the master bedroom of the house and I see the wife for the first time. She looks small and fragile, laying in a 4-post king bed. The curtains are all drawn and the only light is coming from the candles my dad has lit. She doesn't acknowledge me. Her husband sits in a corner of the room, quiet. My dad places me in a chair next to the husband and we watch my dad together. He's praying over the wife's body and she suddenly sits up in bed, screaming. The curtains in the room all fly open at once, and my dad and whatever is left of this lady are just staring at each other, eye to eye. The husband, in a panic, basically scoops me up and carries me out of the room. I stand in the hallway as he goes back to his wife and my dad. After seeing that and experiencing what I did downstairs, I'm just trying to shit my pants and mad at my dad for thinking it was a good idea to bring a kid to these things. I don't feel alone in the hallway, so I basically just sit down on the ground and try to think of being somewhere else. My dad eventually comes out of the room and he doesn't talk. He didn't really say anything to the husband, only whispered instructions, and we left. I didn't see the lady again after that. My mom was so pissed at my dad that day for bringing me along. I mean, it was irresponsible, but I'd like to think of myself as less of a skeptic. To this day, I'm not even sure what I experienced myself. My dad hasn't done an exorcism since. So for context, I need to give you the layout of my house. This happened about 2 or 3 years ago, so I was probably 15 or 16. My room is upstairs, and when you walk out of my room, the stairs are about 6 feet away. And to the right of my room is a bathroom, and next to that is my parents' room. So it was about 12 to 1 in the morning, and I heard my dad going downstairs, which is normal because my whole family are night owls, and it's not uncommon for my dad to go get a snack in the middle of the night. But I heard him going up and down the stairs over and over. I had my door closed, so I couldn't see him, but I knew for a fact it was him because he goes down to get food all the time, but not multiple trips. So the footsteps stop and I think nothing of it. Maybe about 10 minutes pass and what I assume to be my parents' bedroom door slam. Like, it's super loud. I assumed my dad was maybe mad or something because it sounded like someone slammed into it or something. About a minute passes and my dad opens my door and says, "Why did you walk in here and slam the door?" I say, "What are you talking about? I was in here the whole time." "And why were you walking up and down the stairs a bunch?" My dad said, "I've been asleep the whole time. I haven't been downstairs all night." We both kind of freaked out and realised that something else was going on. He said, though, that when he heard the door slam really hard, that it woke him up, and he saw a shadow of a person on the wall. He automatically assumed it was me, and when he fully woke up, he realised it wasn't me, and he got a horrible feeling in the pit of his stomach. We've had some other weird things happen, things falling and weird noises. I've had some other strange stories of our basement door being knocked on after we saw a guy in a bunny suit in our lawn. There was a guy with him filming it, so we assumed it was just some dumb kids putting it on YouTube, but it was pretty scary after that. But that story's the most paranormal thing that's ever happened to me. I hope it was interesting. We moved into my childhood home when I was in the 2nd grade. My parents transferred within their jobs, and we went from a big city into a small, rural town. They wanted us to grow up in a nicer area. My mother has a history of paranormal encounters since she was a child. Not sure if this is relevant, but we have strong Native American ancestry. And when we initially came to check out the house, we stayed in a local Motel 6. My mother told me that after we had visited the house and had headed back to sleep at the Motel 6, she woke up in the dead of night and had an instinctual urge to check on me. She said that she saw a dark figure just standing over me while I was sleeping on the bed. After a few moments, she said that it almost seemed to notice her standing there, and then it disappeared. Years later, my mother told me she had a dream in which her mother visited her. My grandmother passed away before 2001, if I'm not mistaken. I was too young to have anything but fleeting memories of her, sadly. She often spoke about how her mother had visited her in dreams before, but never once had she spoken to her. My grandmother was always silent in her dreams. One dream in particular, though, my mother said her mom showed up in her dream, pointed towards my room down this long hallway we had, and said one thing: "That room is haunted." I don't particularly hold a lot of faith in dreams myself, but when it comes to my mother, I understand that she doesn't bullshit me with stuff like that. Whether it had a meaning or not, the message hit the mark. On one occasion, I was getting ready for school in the morning back in the 8th grade. Class started at 8:30 a.m. for me, and my sister was in 9th grade, and her school started at 8 a.m. sharp. My dad had left with my sister to go get her to school on time, leaving only myself and my mother in the home. My mother was working graveyard shifts at the time, so she was in her room sleeping up on the 2nd floor, which was on the opposite end of the house. I was basically alone. I was standing in the bathroom brushing my teeth when I heard my dog walking into the bathroom. When I turned to greet him, a woman moved right by the open door. Not an ethereal being or a shadow. She looked to be a flesh and blood woman. I shit you not. I can still remember everything about how she looked. She had auburn brown hair that went down just past her freckled shoulders. She was wearing a white nightgown that ended right above the knees, and it had a sort of lace pattern for the shoulder straps and lining the bottom. She was a white woman but had a slight tan, maybe in her mid-30s up to mid-50s if I had to guess her age. The weirdest part was she wasn't walking. She sort of just floated past the door, and her legs faded out into nothingness. I could see her knees and legs, but once you got halfway down her calves, there was just nothing there. No signs of ambulation, just floating past. I could have easily mistaken this incident for an actual human being breaking into my house and walking around, had it not been for the disturbing manner in which she moved. Worst part is, she was going right towards the direction of my bedroom. My room was maybe 3 or 4 feet away from my bathroom. The bathroom was halfway down the hallway. I pretty much sat there in my bathroom with my dog until my father got home, and I didn't tell my parents for at least a month. Another time, I was sleeping on my living room couch back in high school. I pretty much slept on the couch through high school. I had too many strange occurrences to warrant sleeping in my bedroom, when I heard someone or something walk from my kitchen into my living room. I'm talking about hearing the weight of the footsteps on the different surfaces, i.e. laminate flooring in the kitchen. It walked right up to the side of the couch and just stood there. I could literally feel a presence right there. Almost like when an individual is standing super close to you, but not touching you. Yet somehow you can still physically feel them. Imagine standing in a crowded train on the subway where everyone is just packed in. The way you can feel the crowd, even though nobody is actually touching you. I guess that's how I'd describe it. I couldn't tell you what it was. I kept my eyes closed the whole time. All I can say was I had a really bad feeling about that energy. I had never felt anything like it. It was offensive. It definitely unsettled me. Third different occasion here, but one time my entire family had gone to the movie theatre and I was home alone. I had been in my room playing Modern Warfare 2 with some friends online and I had a headset on, meaning I could hardly hear anything aside from the game and chat. I had the volume just low enough to be able to know when they got home. I thought I had heard what sounded like my front door slam, the way the house sort of reverberates, and people talking. I looked over towards my bedroom door and could see the light from the kitchen through the crack at the bottom. As I looked at it, I could see what looked like someone walking through the kitchen, in the way that someone walking in front of a light source would cast a shadow. I figured they must arrive back home, so I took off the headset, walked out of my room and said, "Hey, how was the movie?" Nobody was home. Safe to say, that freaked me out a bit. But I had somewhat grown accustomed to freaky things happening in that house. I just sat back down and continued playing. When in doubt, ignore it. I continued to see the shadows moving in the kitchen, and heard movements until they got back from the movies, maybe an hour later. We did have animals at the time, at least 2 dogs and a cat, but I could easily tell the difference between their shadows and a human shadow, and they usually stayed on the opposite end of the house when my folks weren't home. I had too many smaller incidents to count throughout the years. A few times I'd be sat in my living room with a friend, and we'd both hear something heavily walking down the set of stairs that were no more than 6 feet away from us, or hearing my name being called, etc. But these were some of the more in-your-face events that I've experienced that I can't explain. I'm not religious, so I don't particularly believe in angels and demons and souls being trapped, and everything else associated with the stereotypical image of a ghost. But I'm damn sure there's some shit out there we haven't figured out yet. If you ask me, there are definitely energies that are benevolent or malevolent. But what those energies are, I couldn't tell you. This happened a couple of years ago, in my previous house. So, I was sleeping peacefully in my room, alone, when I awoke to the feeling that something was in my room with me. And a second or two later, I heard the sound of something small walking toward the foot of my bed, from the direction of the door. It sounded kind of like my cat, because I heard the footsteps and then it paused, as if taking notice of me, much like my cat does when entering a room. So I started rolling over to check, because he wasn't supposed to be in the room. But before I could fully roll over, I heard him quickly run the last few steps, jump on the bed, and run across my body before sitting on my face. Of course, I immediately reached my hands up and tried to get him off while saying, "What the fuck, Bobby?" But when I did, there was nothing there. I immediately got up and turned on the light. Not only was he nowhere to be found, but the door was still closed and locked. I was super confused because I felt him run across my body. I felt his weight. So I looked for him in every nook and cranny while calling for him, but he just wasn't there. Now, this is especially strange because I could always leave him in the living room at night so we could access his litter box, and there were 2 doors between my room and the living room which I always closed and locked. So I eventually chalked it up to sleep paralysis, which I had frequently at the time, for some reason only at that house, and went back to sleep. A while later, essentially the same exact thing happens. I awaken to a presence in my room. I hear footsteps approaching the foot of my bed and pause as if noticing me. Except this time, it sounded heavy. It sounded like a fucking person. I literally heard the floor creaking with each step it took. Immediately, my stomach drops and my heart starts pounding. Then once again, I quickly start to roll over. But before I can, the thing does the same exact thing my cat did. I mean, beat for beat. The person runs the last couple steps, leaps onto my bed, straddles me, all while doing this weird grunting thing. Like it was exciting to be doing this to me. At which point it, while still straddling me, puts its entire weight on my torso, pinning me to the bed and then starts fucking choking me. Just like with the ghost cat previously, I could feel the weight of this thing sitting on me, and I could feel its hands wrapped around my neck as clear as day. Almost as soon as it began choking me, it started screaming, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" over and over again, while violently shaking me up and down. It clearly sounded like a man, but I didn't recognize the voice. I was paralyzed by fear for what felt like a solid minute, but as this thing was screaming in my face and trying to kill me, I remembered the cat. Suddenly, I realized how these two experiences were identical, minus the creaking floor and the choking, of course. I mean, literally, the same amount of steps, the pause, and jumping on my bed, then going up my body towards my head. All exactly the same. So I thought, this can't be real. This has to be sleep paralysis. But despite my realization, it didn't go away. So I decided to stop struggling and relax. I figured in the worst case scenario, it really is an intruder, and they think they successfully killed me. So I do. I go completely limp, and within a few seconds, the sound of the screams, the weight on my chest, and the fingers wrapped around my throat start to fade. It takes maybe 10 seconds before I can't hear or feel anything anymore, so I jolt up and turn on the light. Once again, nothing's in the room, and my door is still locked. Terrified, I get dressed and go downstairs into the living room. There, sleeping on the couch, is my cat, and I immediately feel peaceful and sit next to him. I'd like to say it was sleep paralysis, because I had been having episodes around that time, but at no point was I paralyzed. I was able to thrash around the whole time. I also never saw any shadow people or anything. Lastly, I know I wasn't dreaming either, because in both instances I got up, turned on the lights, and walked around. I'm really not sure what to think, but it honestly feels like some angry or evil spirit tried to kill me that day, and my cat warned me about it. Regardless, needless to say, I was so shaken by the experience, I ended up sleeping in the living room for the next 3 months, and never had another experience of any kind, even after I went back to sleeping in the room. This is by far the most wretched energy I've ever come in contact with, and I have quite the list over the years. For those who do not believe me, be happy that you have never encountered something so dark. My freshman year of high school, we moved into the house I currently live in. We didn't know someone died in it. The family that lived there before was an older couple, along with their daughter and granddaughter. The granddaughter and I went to the same high school, but she was a grade above me, so I never really saw her. I promise, this is relevant later. From the first time I visited the house, I was bombarded with activity. That night, when I got home, I saw an older woman in my kitchen. One of my wall hangings got knocked off, and I had sleep paralysis all night. It didn't continue like that at first, but not even a week after moving in, I was freaked out. It started really small in the home, waking up with things on the floor that I didn't leave, lights flickering, my room being abnormally cold. Then the nightmares and sleep paralysis started. This progression occurred consistently, every single night for months. It started with just me waking up, and a small, maybe 5'3", went upright, mildly hunched older woman in the corner. Then she was doing something with her hands. Then she was mumbling very quietly, then walking in a small circle. Eventually, she was talking out loud, clapping her hands, smacking things, and walking around my room. Then she was screaming, wailing, and crawling on my walls. Throughout the progression of the paralysis, the activities while awake were also getting significantly worse. Mind you, my parents are massive skeptics, super fucking religious, and think I'm a Satan worshipper because I wear all black. So they were absolutely no help, and dismissed everything going on as me forgetting or being crazy. The things they couldn't explain, they flat out ignored. I have OCD. Things have to be closed around me. Drawers, closet doors. Since I was a child. I would wake up with all of my drawers and closet door open, and all of my clothes sprawled all over the floor. I would hear tapping, scratching, breathing. I would be falling asleep and my lights would flick on. When I got up and turned them off, it would repeat. So I started to sleep with all of my lights on. I'm not kidding when I say I was terrorized. I woke up screaming with no idea why 1,000,000 times. Weird bruises all over my body. Disgusting smells of rotten flesh and old lady perfume all the time. When I say that I barely slept for 6 straight months, I mean it. 20 to 30 minutes periods every hour. I got maybe 2 hours on a good night. One night, I dozed off and quickly woke up with sleep paralysis. For the first time in months though, there was nothing. No grandma, no sounds, absolutely nothing. So I'm like, what the fuck is this? I get a text and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck? I've never experienced anything like this in this state. So I went to grab my phone. An older woman drops down from the ceiling and strangles me. I'll never forget her face, screaming at the top of her lungs, "Get out! Get the fuck out of my house!" I spent the entire weekend at my friend's house, and when I went back for some clothes, wide-ass awake, we both saw an old woman crossing my living room. I was scared shitless, obviously. The next day at school, I saw the girl who used to live there. I looked dead myself. So when I approached her, she could tell I had something going on. I didn't tell her a single thing about my situation and only asked her if she knew if someone died in the house. She gave me this sideways glance, then pursed her lips and word vomited a mile a minute about her great-grandma, who had dementia. She tells me about how she was fucking insane and caused a lot of problems for them, and that there were times when they had to lock her in her room. She told me her grandparents told her not to tell me. She died in what became my bedroom, and they moved shortly after. I found out later from an ex-BFF of the girl who lived there, I live in a pretty small town, that the room was filled with photos of that woman from her whole life, all ages. She had no clue who she was, and her bedroom was filled with pictures of her from various stages in her life. Horrible, but what's worse? I have closet door mirrors. She was locked in a room, only able to see herself, but with no memory or concept of it. The psychological torment that was her environment had pure intentions, but was beyond counterintuitive. I also saw an old picture of her maybe 6 months ago. Same woman from all the nightmares. I don't think that the woman herself was who haunted me. I think her demonic energy capitalized off of her spirit and image to get to me. I ended up getting rid of it, but I can tell you for a fact I will never ever again have my energy taken advantage of like that. It's truly a matter of allowance. This room is still a spiritual hotspot for sure. I also try to kill myself in here, so stuff picks up on that lingering energy. I allow the passerby to use my mirrors as portals. I have an antique one that they do love. And I do occasionally come across some pretty cool energies, as well as mischief. If this taught me anything, it's that you can have just as much control over an energy as they may have over you. Plus you have the leverage of it being your space. Keep in mind, most of these things were human at some point. They have the same impulses and desires. If your sibling is trying to annoy you and it just isn't working, they'll find something better to do. This is the same thing. I just wanted to share a weird experience that happened when I was 14 or 15. Before school, I went outside at 6 to 7 a.m. to pet my dog. From across the yard, I could see what looked like a goat, but it was standing on what I can describe as 2 backwards legs. It had horns with the face of a human and was using inward, looked broken, arms to pull grass out of the fence line to eat. I sat there next to my dog for at least 10 minutes watching this thing in disbelief, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. I could clearly see a side profile of it, and it was moving. I got up and snuck around trees trying to make my way closer. I must have lost sight of it, and when I got to the spot, the thing was gone, but I had an overwhelming feeling of goosebumps. I'd say I felt like I was being watched, but I don't believe in that anomaly. The closest thing I could ever compare the creature to was the fan from the movie Pan's Labyrinth. Except what I saw was smaller, about 3 foot tall. I'm bringing this up now because I can't get it out of my head after this past November 13th. Something really terrible happened to me last Friday. It was my choice and I went through with it. It's just one of those decisions that will be with me forever. But upon reading more about Pan, it's definitely something that is in the wheelhouse. I'm wondering if the sighting was a warning of what would come, and I'm wondering if anyone else here has seen something similar. If so, please tell me. I really want to dig deeper into this. After this experience, I've known something is out there. I still have the calendar that I marked Creature in Backyard, nearly 12 years later. This happened about 10 years ago to a childhood friend and me. We'll call her MJ. It's strange to look back on because while it was happening, I found it annoying more than anything else. It wasn't until later that I began to appreciate it for what it was. MJ's family owned and ran a community theatre, a block away from where they lived. The theatre was in the old commissary for the local mill. Our town grew famous from technology and space, but started its real swing into the 20th century with the mills, most of which are now being converted to community arts centres, office space, etc. The areas around each mill, although now in a new growth period, have been poor and neglected, and yes, historical since forever. After being the commissary, it operated as a motion picture house, and then a boys and girls club. Years of abandonment sprinkled throughout, and finally, the theatre. MJ worked at the theatre doing odd jobs of all varieties, but mainly cleaning and prepping for shows, as well as acting in quite a few. I would help her where and when I could, mainly to appease her since I didn't get paid. One day, she called me up and said to come and meet her at her parents' house. Chill, toke, whatever, but that she had something to show me. She wouldn't tell me what it was, and I was more interested in getting high than her telling me what was up. She tended to be a bit dramatic, so it would have been any mundane thing blown up. I get over there, joint rolled, ready to toke, but she won't have it. Wants us to walk up to the theatre right quick. Just for a minute, mind you, and then we'll be gravy. Now back at this time, I was a pothead. I hadn't smoked all day, and I was annoyed to wait. Especially since it was my green, she rarely threw in. Whatever. She didn't want me to drive, so we walked up there. Her being evasive as to what she wants me to see, and what exactly we're doing. Fine. At this point, I figured she put off some cleaning duties and just wanted my help and wasn't saying so for whatever reason. So we get there, the place is empty, no cars on the lot, no vagrants outside. We punch in the security code and go into the lobby, which has public restrooms and a beautiful 2-sided staircase that goes up to the actual theatre. One side goes up to the ticket booth, the other past a hanging room, and then onto the green room, where cast parties and meets and greets were held. She led me up the stairs which I had gone up and down easily hundreds of times. As we were going up towards the green room, my chest was heavy, like I was exerting myself. By the time we got to the 3 metal steps that went off the main staircase to the projection room, I was panting and pissed. At this point, I had started bitching about how I wanted to toke, and that whatever we were doing was lame. We stop at the offshoot stairs, and she tells me to look inside. Not go inside, but look inside. The metal grate over the doorway was open. The chain that usually kept it shut and locked was gone, but that was whatever. You couldn't keep an eye on everything, and everyone, and her stepdad had given up on that detail. I walked up the steps, heart pounding, panting like I just ran the whole way and looked into the blackness. The room was small, about 10 by 10 feet. I could see a ceiling fan on the floor, and that was really it. Dark and empty. I was exasperated. "What do you see?" MJ asked. "I don't see a damn thing. A fan?" "A fan," she prodded. "You don't see anything else?" No, I don't. A dumb fan and nothing. Except I did see something else. A door on the wall opposite us. It was ajar, with blue lights spilling out from the couple-inch gap. The way light does when the door opens towards you, not away. Fine. A door. I also see the door, MJ. Hey, what the fuck's your problem? Do you have a point? Door? She replied, eyes searching into the darkness of the room, playing dumb, probably having a grand old time. Yes, the door. It's cracked. Where does it even go? I didn't know there was another room in here. I'll go shut at it if you leave me alone. I moved to walk into the room, only to have her grab my arm, hard mind you, and proclaim there's no door. She dragged me down the staircase and out of the lobby into the night. She was spooked, and I was pissed. She wouldn't talk to me until I got a block down and kept looking over her shoulder back to the theatre the whole time. Remember, I told you she was dramatic. By the time she would talk, she couldn't tell me what she had wanted to show me. Swore she couldn't remember or some shit. As for the door, she said she saw it, but that it wasn't real. I called BS. It was there. I didn't hallucinate. It was there, plain as day. Hard to see because of how dark it was in there, but a partially open door nonetheless. It wasn't until a while later that I realised the door couldn't have been there. The room had one entry, the one with the metal grate, and the walls were concrete blocks. Empty air with a 15-foot drop is what would have met you on the other side. I was so annoyed with the whole situation. I thought she was pranking me, but she was unnerved by it. She loved to tell ghost stories at the theatre, always wanted to do ghost hunts there, and always swore something had grabbed her when she was cleaning up late. I ended up going back up there in the next day or two. The blackness of the room replaced with dimness, and you could plainly see that there was no door, and nowhere for a door to go. MJ later claimed that she saw the door too, not until after I said it was there. She was still scared though, scared that it had happened, and scared that I had wanted to close it. And that's about that. There were other things that happened, none of them as memorable, just more run-of-the-mill, this place would be haunted stuff. Hearing voices in the dressing rooms when you were the only person on that floor, but nothing ever distressing. Nothing that you couldn't shake off after a moment. I can still see that door in my mind's eye, and equally how much it just wasn't there. Couldn't possibly be there any other day of the year. I don't know what to consider this. Something with dimensions or phantom doorways? It's weird, but it's true, and so far, in the past 10 years, I haven't had a similar experience. I used to live in Indonesia before migrating to the States, and I remember this one thing that really scared me back then. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time, so I guess I can't blame myself if it was just my overactive mind, and I was just scaring myself. But here's the story. We had a stay-at-home maid at the time, which I think is a pretty common thing there. My mum would hire some random maid and they'd live at our house and get paid until they leave for any reason. We had a couple of them over the span of me growing up, but this one maid is the reason why I'm writing this. My family loved her because she was just overall a good person and helped my mom with daily tasks a lot. One of those tasks being to wake me up for school on school days. Usually, I'd wake up to her calling my name a couple times, and then I'd get ready. But this one day, I woke up to her voice. Like she was having a conversation with someone, but it was just her voice. I don't know what she was saying since I just woke up, but I know she wasn't calling my name. And the thing that scared me was when I opened my eyes, I saw that she had her back turned towards me, facing the wall. She kept talking to the wall until I called her, and then she turned around and acted as if I didn't just see her talk to a wall, then got me ready for school. When I asked her who she was talking to, she said it was nothing and that she was singing or something. I don't remember if I believed her at the time, but I do know that same night, I couldn't fall asleep because I was so scared, and it didn't help that my bed position made me face that same wall. So I told my mom, but she was a Christian and just told me to pray and sleep. That instance only happened once, and I've never woken up to my maid talking to the wall again. Eventually, that maid left because of family reasons not too long after, so my mom had to hire a new one. It wasn't even that long before that new maid left. I overheard her pleading with my mom to let her go because she was so scared living in our house. She said when she tries to sleep, she would hear whispers next to her. Her door would swing open by itself sometimes when she's in the room, or she would hear someone knock her door at times where we'd all be fast asleep already. But the thing that scared me the most from her experience is when we left her to guard the house alone while my family went to the market to get groceries. She said she kept hearing a lady's voice or something that sounded like my mom coming from our room upstairs while she watches TV downstairs. This reminded me of the last maid when she was talking to the wall, and this got me shaking. I don't remember sleeping with the lights off ever again after that. Even until now, I still leave the light on. Anyways, I think my mum got concerned for that maid at the time because she was hysterically crying while telling all her stories. So she lets her go back to her family. Nothing strange happened again with the maids after, but I developed a thing where I prayed every night before I slept since I was scared. What a terrible time. I still get chills thinking about it. I used to see green lights in the forest areas from my childhood home. It was a vacant lot, about 2 acres full of that famous Appalachian kudzu, laurel, and rhododendron. I liked to be there. It felt like a magic world to my 8-year-old self. My younger brother and I built a fort in those woods. We were surrounded by them after all. These glowing green orbs would flicker and dance around me. I never thought it out of the ordinary. I had and have a great imagination, although I'm now quicker to deduce fact from fantasies. Well, one day, they began excavation to build a home there. That evening, a sprightly little glow entered my cracked bay window into my bedroom. Its glow woke me from my sleep, and it asked if it could stay with me. Of course, if you don't have a home now, you could stay here, I said. It left in a wisp, and from that day never did feel much different. I did, although I felt it as if it were a force greater than you or I was at play. The following late afternoon, my father had shuttled my brother and I from our school day. There was a commotion coming from the road nearest our street. Flutes, drums, and singing in words I'm not equipped to relate. The street was lined with cars. We could not as much pull into our driveway. It was a Cherokee funerary procession. There were hundreds of native bodies found while excavating, and this is not how the indigenous to my area disposed of the dead. They were at all times to be placed in mounds of layered silt sand and dirt sediments of varying density, and a thatched vine that would create an earthen bubble for them to reside eternally. Placed among them often were earthenware vessels and beads. Now I'm unsure of the orange orb. I felt I need not even speak of its presence. I'm inclined to observe I was not fond of its energy. As it tested alone among the green orbs, I had grown fond of, but it was there. I do not know what it all means, but I do know one thing. Mind where it is you step among the laurels, as the Fae treads the lands as we do. Okay, so this is going to sound super crazy, but I'm honestly kind of freaking out, so I have to vent somewhere, and I'd like to know what other people think might be happening. So I'm hiding here in my attic at midnight, typing this shit out. Anyways, I don't really know where to begin or how to describe what has been happening. But I live in this small town. We're about 25 minutes away from cities going north, west, and south, and a mountain to the east. Since COVID, me and my roommates have taken to going on drives through the woods that surround our town. So we all know these roads extremely well and drive them constantly. And now several times while driving at night through a particular area, we have strange things happen to us that we have absolutely no way to explain. As of tonight, we have decided to start trying to decide these incidents, to try and find some explanation, but nothing makes sense. About a week ago was when the first large incident occurred. We were driving our usual route. We were driving through the woods, and suddenly, on the side of this road, there was this huge creature, about the size of an elk, with fur that looked bearish, but it moved almost like a car, and was skinny and long, and scared the shit out of us. We sped down the road to try to outdistance between us and it, even though it seemed to largely ignore our car. The speed on this particular road is 25. So at this point we were largely scared, so we decided we would probably just head home. We had to be back home at about 10 to go to sleep for work in the morning, and it was only 7:03. But we were running low on gas and we were closer to one of the larger cities than to our town. So we decided to head toward there because from where we were, it should be about just a 10-minute drive. We were driving for about 3 minutes when suddenly we all just felt wrong. Something was off, but no one could tell what. And we continued on to the gas station, arriving at what should have been about 20 past 7. But as we're getting gas, we check our phones and somehow it was now 9:47. And absolutely no one could account for the time. And there was no way the gas we had could have possibly driven for 2 hours. And we needed to be home. But I don't like the speed, especially at night, so we decided we would just be home late. We called our other roommates and let them know we were running late, and they gave us shit for being out for so long. But that's beside the point. So we head back toward our town, which would be expected to take about 25 minutes, like I said before. And that's about what the drive felt like. About 15 minutes into the drive back on the side of the road again, there's a huge creature, this time standing up on its hind legs, at least 10 feet tall. And I just fucking swerve around it and then speed like hell towards home. This is now on a separate road. So we then pull up to our house and head in, and our roommate freaks out and asks us if we got gas here in town. And we were like, no, the city, like we said. And he was staring at us weird. And we looked at the clock and it was 9:53. And we were inside our house. It made no sense. First, we lost 2 hours. And now we make a 25-minute drive in 5 minutes with my slow-ass driving. In my shitty car that can't go over 50. We couldn't explain it. We went over everything from a time anomaly to alien abduction to witchcraft. We were just at a complete loss. So we avoided going on drives for a bit because we were just worried about what the absolute hell was going on. But we eventually broke down and went into the woods again. Tonight. And I'm honest, I'm terrified to my wit's end. I can't sleep. Nothing fucking out of the ordinary, just driving. Sorry. But we were passing familiar fences. About 2 minutes from our town, and then suddenly, I start having a horrible headache. And my roommate who was talking just stood. Everything got fuzzy, and we both closed our eyes, and suddenly the road was wrong. I had no idea where I was. I swerved in a panic, but regained myself and kept driving. We were both dumbfounded. She asked me where we were and I had no answer. Then after about 30 seconds, a familiar street sign came by. We were suddenly entering a city we had just been nowhere near. We had travelled over 50 miles in the blink of an eye. I literally cried. I have no idea how it happened. We immediately turned on the road home and I refused to blink most of the way. And when I did, I made sure she was keeping her eyes open and on the road. We got home and I was literally in the attic. And here I am, posting this. Please, someone believe me and explain this. I'm terrified. Alright, this is an encounter that I had with a spirit quite a few times. At the time of the series of events, I was a sophomore in high school. I have a friend who could drive. I couldn't at the time, and he would drive me to his place on almost every weekend, and I would stay the night, and he would drive me back on Sunday. He lives with his parents but has a man cave he sleeps in, which is a giant shed that he made really cool. It was huge. It was split in two. Half was a garage, and the other half was a giant room. This is all separated from the main house with a pool in between. Also, just to put it out there, every time I stop telling people this story, I get very giddy, and sometimes I'm even shiver, and I'm not even cold. The end of the story is kind of sad, but here's how it went. All started with my friend Cole, a really funny guy, but also a bit crazy. I really only talked to him during my lunch and then after school on Xbox. He decided that I should hang out at his place over the weekend suddenly, and I agreed. So I went and we had a blast. Nothing out of the ordinary with the visit. At some point in time, he did mention that all the friends he had over usually say that they feel like they're being watched, and some have even said that they have seen figures in the windows of the shed. About 5 or so of us of our other friends have said that this shed had some sort of paranormal activity, but little did I know, I would have the worst of it. He proposed that next time I come over, I should bring an EMF and try to see if anything was there. I told him I had one from a ghost tour I took in Las Vegas a year before. I brought it, and little did you know, nothing. So I just told Cole that our friends were full of it. I go a third time, and this is when things start to paint the picture. This time we brought another friend of ours who had never been to his place. The first signs of anything paranormal that I later confirmed was sometimes when I was playing the Xbox, it would randomly shut off. It was kind of weird, since it only happened to me, but I thought nothing of it. Later that day, while me and the other two were just playing a game of pool, we heard an alarm go off outside of his house. We go and investigate. We find the source, and it was some sort of motion detector that was connected to his shed. It looked like it was wired to the wall, but also had a solar panel on. The wire was cut off, but we assumed it was running on solar. We found it odd that this would start randomly going on and off throughout the rest of the night. We were woken up by the alarm in the morning. This was about the time I start to think that just maybe this could be paranormal, but I brush it off. Same thing with the alarm and Xbox on this day. Next weekend, I'll go again. This time it was happening way more often. Cole said that this was bizarre because it was happening when I was there the weekend before and stopped on Sunday afternoon when he dropped me off at my house, and it never happened again during the week. I thought something had to be up. I actually have 2 videos of both of these occurrences on video on my old phone that I need to upload. This weekend, shit got serious. This may sound crazy, but I proposed that if there is a spirit here, can you turn on the Xbox? It turned on. I was shocked and chills went down my spine. My friend was a little unaffected. I thought that he had to have a controller hidden behind his back, so I made him stand up in front of me and I said to turn the Xbox off. It turned off. This is the moment I knew there was something there. I decided to ask a series of questions. Turning the Xbox on or off would be yes, and doing nothing would be no. After a few questions or so, what I got out of it was that whatever it was a male, and it did not want me there. Supposedly, it did not want to harm me either. This time, I only stayed over for 1 day because I had a wrestling tournament I had to go to on Sunday. Me being the dumbass, I kept going over to his place because we had lots of fun together. The next weekend I went would be my last, and ever since, I refused to go back. At this point, Cole could be playing Xbox, and when he handed me the controller, it just immediately turned off. No matter how many times I tried to play, I just couldn't. It was around dawn, and shit just started hitting the fan. To this day, I don't know why, but Cole still believes that his shed isn't haunted. Every time he would leave me in the shed to go get something, I would sit still and silently freak out, hoping for him to get back soon. This is how bad I was freaked out. He was gone for only 5 minutes, and it felt like an eternity. I was sitting still on the couch singing to myself to try and calm me down when the door sounded like it got hit by a battering ram. This happened a few times. I got up, ran to the corner of the room and pulled out a pocket knife I had. I've never been this scared in my life. It stopped, and then next a bag of chips flew off the table. I just sat down and started praying. No fucking joke. He eventually got back and saw me holding a knife, sitting in the corner half sobbing. He was like, "What the fuck happened to you?" I told him about it, and for the rest of the time I was there, I refused to be in a room without him in it. Roughly an hour later, when I calmed down, the door started getting bashed again. Cole this time pulled his knife and went to the door. He opened it just as one of the slams happened, and behold, nothing there. He then proceeded to go out and look around, and I quickly followed, not wanting to be in the shed alone. We find nothing, although we do see that there were dents in the outside of the door. When we get back inside, I'm questioning him, asking if he thinks his shed is haunted. He still refused and thought that I was doing some prank bullshit. I was very concerned what the hell kind of drug he's on to not think anything of it. Later, I use his shower. He had a bathroom in the shed too. I get out, Cole is on the Xbox, and I'm getting dressed in the corner. Next thing I know, all the lights go out. I have a small panic attack and immediately bolt for the door, only wearing my underwear, with a half pulled up pair of shorts. Cole comes out and asks me what I did. I just told him I was putting clothes on, which was obvious. I literally hold on to him like a little bitch while he maneuvers over to the breaker, while we only use a phone flashlight. Apparently, the spirit popped the breaker. I was just so done at that point, where I asked him to just drop me off at my house, but he said no because it was already midnight. Later, we watched YouTube and eventually just started looking at our phones. We were using the Xbox YouTube app. I shit you not, the screen started scrolling through videos until it found some weird puppet music video shit that got darker as the song went on. I had no idea what to do, knowing that something obviously doesn't want me there and I can't leave. I decided to pull up a message keyboard and then the fucking square on the screen started moving over the letters to spell get out. I felt so powerless. Getting out was the only thing I wanted to do. Later in the night, right before I go to bed, Cole is sleeping at this time. I get up to get some water and hear a loud ass hiss and I bust my ass backwards. I said fuck it and slept outside. 57 degrees out and it was so much better than being scared shitless. Although I barely got any sleep, it was morning and I'm begging Cole to get my ass home. I wait in his truck while he gets his things. His truck is on the other side of the shed and is separated by one big wall with 2 doors on each side. When he gets in the car, he starts yelling at me while I was banging on the 2 doors connected to each side of the shed. Note that the doors are at least 20 feet apart. He dropped me off and sadly since then we've barely spoken. We were good friends and even to this day, he believes that there was no paranormal activity and that it was me doing everything. Barely anyone I tell this to believes me. Most people say that I was just pranked or something like that. But damn well knew it was real. I've had some minor paranormal encounters in the past, but this one was the one that I will never forget.